up here, but.
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order, please. You've got our tight schedule tonight. All those in favor? Please note this meeting is being recorded by Zoom for the purposes of note-taking, minutes, and ECTV. Also, this is an interview for the select board and the candidates. There'll be no public comment, unfortunately. But at this point, anybody that can stand, please stand for the pledge. Dan, would you read it from the pledge?
Sure thing. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our town search committee. They did a magnificent job. They worked hard. They went through a lot of resumes, and in them here, I'd like to have them stand up and be recognized. John Bartels.
Hey, big job, guys.
Leah Carlello Windrow, I'm sorry. John Kelly, he's on his way home from Ireland. And Deborah Mary.
All right, Dave.
Martin Malley,
yeah.
Did you mention? I didn't.
Yeah, I mentioned
Okay.
it, John. But thank you guys, you did a fantastic job.
Thank you. I hope you come to a consensus.
Yes.
This week or tomorrow. And
You gave us three great candidates, so I think you made our job a little hard.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. Brittany, we do the roll call, please.
Dan Escott,
Here?
John Moyle,
Yes, here.
Tony Pagliarulo, on Zoom. Our
Tony,
chair-
here? Tony, can we hear Tony? He's that, yeah, we need to hook him in, he's just looking blankly here. I'm here.
Yes, you are. The entire chair, Robert Bishop. He's not muted.
Daughter, can you hear us?
Hello.
Oh, good, how you doing?
Here, anyone?
All right.
Oh, you
good.
can't hear
You
him?
can't hear us?
No, I guess not. Turn on the microphone.
Could you pass me those pens
Hello.
there?
Hi, Tony. Can you hear us?
I can now. Thank you.
Sorry.
Hi, Tony.
Greetings.
Hey, Tony.
Hello.
Hey, Tony, how are you?
Hola. Very good. Thanks. Bye.
Okay.
You're up late, my friend.
Yes, I am.
Okay, I also like to thank our consultants, Buzz and Bob. And Buzz is going to be bringing in the candidates and introduce them to us. So, Buzz, if you can hear us, bring in the first candidate, please.
They're in the boardroom.
Okay.
See, he didn't want it. It's kind of looking.
Yeah. It's facing us.
Yeah, I know. It's Lauren. I said,
Mr. Chairman, I have Eric Anderson, Administrator of Andover, Connecticut. Eric, good to see you.
Hello, Eric.
Do you
Welcome.
want to sit on the side here or facing you?
Hi, Terry Williams, interim manager.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks. Let's go select board member.
Dan, nice to meet you.
John Boyle, select board member.
Nice to meet you. Even though I'm not interviewing, I would like to meet you.
Eric, we have one more member. He's in Spain.
Nice to see you.
Sure. Sure, okay. Yeah. Great. Nice to meet you, Tony.
Now, Tony's in España.
Ah, Okay,
And guess how late it is?
It's pretty late.
Eric, how would you like to be addressed?
just my first name, Eric is fine.
Okay. We're gonna jump right into this, because we wanna see what it's all about.
Sure.
Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Do you have a brief introductory statement that you'd like to make to the board?
Sure. As you probably know, my name is Eric Anderson. I've been serving as a town administrator now for 6 years. Frankly, I took the job, or I applied for the job, because I thought I could do better than the person that held it before me. And I thought the town deserved better governance than it had at the time. I'm spent much of my adult life racing sailboats and ice boats. That chapter is pretty much ended, but I still like to bicycle. I'm an avid paddleboarder. I like the outdoors in general. A couple of years ago, I really kind of started planning for eventual retirement someplace north of where I live now. This is one area I've always liked, the Berkshires, and I've always liked southern Vermont. And I really thought if I was going to do that, instead of waiting another 10 years or so till I retire, why not find a job somewhere where I want to live now? So that's basically what I'm doing. I saw the job was open in Dalton, and I applied for it, thinking that would be a good fit for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dan?
Eric, could you please tell us what you see as Dalton's greatest resources and challenges, and how you as a town manager would go about utilizing such resources and addressing challenges?
So I think Dalton has several things going for it. One, you seem to have a strong community with a nice downtown. You have an awful lot of natural resources. In Dalton, roughly half the land area is public land, which is really unique in most parts. Most towns would love to have a quarter of what you have for natural resources. The Appalachian Trail comes through here. You're in a spot which is very desirable for quality of life. It also seems like you've got a really good long-term partnership with the recreation facility here in town, which again is an asset that most communities would love to get to, but you have now. So I think what you have is a community that people want to live in. The issues you face are the same that a lot of small towns face, both in the Northeast and throughout the country, and that is an aging population, and the struggle to maintain affordability for the residents. And that's really the key, is to be able to deliver services and be able to do it without breaking everybody financially. So that's kind of what I see as Dalton's, biggest asset, is really quality of life. I mean, this is a community that, as I look at it from an outside, has an awful lot of things I've been trying to develop for the community that I'm in now, and you already have much of it. So I think you're in a strong position. You're well positioned. It's just a question of, kind of how you move forward, and whether there's specific things that you want to address to make life better for the town. Obviously, there's some issues with the transition from being largely a mill town to, a town with a wider range of, of jobs and opportunities. So, the town is shrinking slowly, but it looks like here it's mostly due to the decreased birth rate, which is the same thing you see many places in the country. That answer your question?
Any ideas to address some of those challenges in terms of a shrinking tax base?
Well, I think
our budgetary needs.
the first thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to really aggressively go after grant funding, because no town today can afford to pay all its own bills, without state and federal assistance. That has kind of been one of my focus for Andover, because I realized most of the tasks the Board of Selectmen gave me that they wanted to accomplish were not things that the taxpayers were ever going to fund, at least wholly. So I've looked at it and said the goal is to grant fund as much of the quality of life things you can, and do the same with infrastructure. That's been, it's not a quick process. You can't walk in one day and say, hey, give me $5 million. You have to make the personal connections first. And you have to have all your planning documents lined up. So when you go in and you're applying for grants, you point right back to your master plan and say, hey, in our master plan for the last 5 years, we've been saying we really need to address this. And you say, this is beyond our financial capability. And how do we go that next step? And you have to be willing to ask. You have to be willing to ask at the state level and also at the federal level.
Excellent, thank you. I think that ties in nicely with the next question. I think Tony's going to handle that question. Thank you.
I thought I had question number 3.
You.
Oh, number 3?
Yeah?
Okay. Welcome, Eric. Hello, from Spain.
Hello.
Eric, describe a successful grant proposal you've written, detailing your role, the process, how you aligned it with the funder's priorities, any challenges you faced, and the outcome.
Sure. So a good example would be, since around the mid-'70s, every plan of conservation and development the town has had a statement in there saying we need to make the town of Andover more walkable and bikeable, yet nothing was ever actually done. So one of the first things I did was I sat down with the Planning and Zoning Commission and said, okay, of that goal, what are the real priorities? And I then proceeded to write a grant with the Department of Transportation called the Community Connectivity Grant. And my goal was to bundle a whole series of things that were fairly low-hanging fruit into one grant application and start the process rolling. So I was able to get a grant for right around $300,000. And then in discussing it with the Department of Transportation, I got the signals division to upgrade the crosswalk signals at the same time. So we were able to parlay that initially into about a $450,000 project, which was great. Took a couple years, 2.5 years, to bring to actual construction, in part because we were doing some work on state property, and it took me 1.5 years to get the Attorney General's office to sign off on the town working on state land. The second half of that was a pathway that connects the town municipal complex, which is the town hall, the school, and our new community center, down to the rail trail and to the projects that we did in the first phase. I've been trying for about 8 or 9 years to fund that. I put in 4 applications, I think, total to the DEEP to fund the study grant, and I went after legislative funding a couple of times before I got that. So that took me realistically about 6 years to get the initial funding. So I got a study grant from the legislature. I took that money and I used that money to determine where we wanted to go. We had a series of public meetings, so I was sure the public was okay with the routes we had selected. And then I wrote 2 further grants for that. I wrote a big one for construction funding for a pathway that's about 0.6 of a mile that connects the Hop River Trail to the municipal complex. That was a state transportation grant called LOTSIP. And I received funding for that. I received a $2.9 million grant for construction. That grant program's a little different than a lot of ones in the state, in that they'll fund 100% of construction, but they won't fund design. And then I also turned around and used the rest of the study money to get us to about the 60% design phase for that aspect. Out of the initial study came 2 potential pathways. I took the second pathway and I reapplied to DEEP for a study grant through their recreational trails program. And I got that one too, which was about a $85,000 grant. We went to town meeting and the town agreed to put up the matching funds for that, because that particular grant had a 20% match. So, in Connecticut, generally, the hardest part is getting study funds and getting design funds. All total, between those 2 projects, right now, we've secured around $3.1 million in funding for that. The Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance are still having a little bit of a disagreement because they've refused to fund the rest of the design money. So I have a construction-funded project sitting there, and I don't have the money to complete the funding. But we're also going ahead with the second part of that, which is designing the secondary pathway. And the good thing of that is we have 100% of the design funds, and I think I should be able to fund the construction for that also with the LOTSIP grant. So it's really persistence, it's understanding what your objective is, and then just keep pushing for it, because you're gonna get rejected a bunch of times, and you have to just keep applying, but you also have to make the personal connections with all the people that sit on the grant funding boards and really kind of understand. And also, when you get a rejection, go back to the board and say, okay, what didn't you like about this grant? Why wasn't it strong? Why wasn't it selected? So that the next time out, you're more likely to be, selected. So it's a long process, but it can be very fruitful. So far in 6 years, we've received, of the grants I've written, just over $15 million in funding in 6 years in a town with an operating and capital budget of $4 million, not including schools. So we've been pretty successful at it, but it takes a while and it takes a lot of effort. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thanks.
You
Okay, John, you're up.
Yeah, okay. Eric, as the new town manager, how would you evaluate the current structure, effectiveness, and efficiencies of the town departments? And how would you approach making any changes you deem necessary?
Sure. So I think the first answer for that is whatever you do, you don't want to make decisions quickly. I would not expect in the first 3 or 4 months to be making any major personnel changes. You want to evaluate people and see how they actually operate. Budgetarily, you want to be looking and benchmarking yourself on other communities, because it's very easy if you have a department that's costing you considerably more than average or considerably less. You need to know that going in. And then you need to talk to people who are the subject matter expert, because a town consists of many employees, and they all tend to be very knowledgeable about a very specific task. A town manager is a generalist, so I'm not necessarily going to know the ins and outs of the tax code, but you have to observe people, and you have to talk to people, and you have to talk to residents so you know what the residents are concerned about. And because for better or for worse, we're a public service, and we're a customer-facing public service entity. So our job, in the end, is to make life better for residents. So you have to have employees that have that mindset.
Okay, thank you. Bishop.
Okay. Please tell us about your greatest strength and also tell us about your greatest weakness.
I think I'm persistent and I refuse to be outworked. This is not a 9-to-5 job. It never has been. And I think the smaller the town, the harder you need to work. So I think the ability to put in the time, both to understand what the issues are and to understand the people, and who you're dealing with and the public, that's probably my greatest strength. I'm also fairly analytical. I worked in a lab for many, many years doing data analysis and basically benchtop science. So dealing with numbers, understanding, are we being effective? What metrics should we be applying? And then going back in and saying, okay, we made a change. What did that actually do? Did it make it better? Did it make it worse? Do we need to tweak this, or is this, good? So I would say that's my biggest strength. In terms of weakness, I'll readily admit I didn't come up through the standard track for a town manager or a town administrator, which is a master's in public administration, starting someplace as a deputy town manager. So I definitely see among my peers in bigger towns that I talk to some weaknesses in terms of my knowledge that they gained through education. But I think in a smaller town, what's more important is a town manager that can actually be hands-on, and I think that negates some of the big weakness. I would not feel comfortable or have any desire managing, I wouldn't want to be the town manager of Boston, or Hartford or West Hartford, Connecticut. That's a skill set that I don't think necessarily aligns well with me, but I think my skill set aligns pretty well with a smaller town where an administrator takes on a lot more roles.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Eric, the town manager is responsible for preparing and presenting the town's annual operating budget and capital budget to the select board and finance committee. Please tell us about your experience with budgeting, preferably in a municipal environment.
Sure. So budgeting is the primary where I am now. I am the primary person for budgeting for the town. Since I've been there, we've gone through a number of finance office staff. So for a significant period of my tenure, I did the majority of the budgeting. I certainly don't do it all. The first thing I do is I give a copy of each individual department head a copy of their last year's budget. And then I ask them to get back to me with preliminary numbers and an explanation of why. And then I sit down with each of the department heads, and once I'm satisfied with that, we collate that into a larger budget. And then there's some things that I take on personally, like because I have an energy efficiency background, I've often got pretty wildly inflated numbers for energy, both fuel usage, electrical usage, something like that. And so we've been able to pare that back to reality by just doing some fairly simple calculations about how much fuel we're actually using, what our projected costs are. So I guess I'm very familiar with the budget process. Where I work now, what happens is I present the Board of Selectmen initially a budget around January 1st. They typically schedule 7 or so budget meetings as a Board of Selectmen and then pass it off to the Board of Finance, who tends to spend another 6 or 7 meetings discussing it and then passing it off and going through the public engagement process. Not that the public's not invited all through the process, but very rarely is there any public participation until you get to the very last step of the town meeting. The last 2 years, although we've gone through very long budget processes, there's very little to any difference between the budget I present and the budget that the Board of Finance stamps. In some parts, it's a little crazy because I spent 14 meetings going through this, and essentially they're taking the budget that I give them in the first place. So, which is, makes me feel good, but it's also, we've been debating as a town for a while, is there a better way to make that system more efficient? Because we're chewing up a pretty big chunk of time, and they're essentially, in the end, accepting the budget that I present them to start with. So that's at least how I'm used to doing it. I'm more than happy to adopt whatever systems that you have in place in Dalton.
Tony, thank you very much.
Okay, Eric. Please describe your role and relationship with department heads in previous positions and how you would establish a leadership position and promote communication and teamwork with and across departments.
Sure. So, first of all, we're a small enough town that we have very few department heads. The only real true departments heads we have are the library director, the public works director, and and now within the last year, the director of our community center. The advantage I have is all those individuals I hired. So we start with good chemistry because I picked people that I thought were good for the job. So I think you have to talk to people on a regular basis. I have shied away from a lot of the typical, formulaic every 6-month evaluations, but I talk to almost every employee we have, on at least a weekly basis. I talk to the head of the finance department a couple times a week. I talk to the bookkeeper on a daily basis. We're the first 2 people into the office in the morning. So usually I spend the first half hour or so of my day going over the books. The town clerk is very new. So she's a person that right now has needed a lot of guidance from a lot of other departments. I see her, on a daily basis. So Andover's still small enough that I can interact directly with basically all of the employees other than Public Works. Most of my communication is with the Director of Public Works, not the individual employees. But I do talk to them all, at least occasionally. So I think I prefer, frequent, fairly informal communication with all the employees. We do schedule about every 6 months, I'll have an employee-wide meeting because sometimes there are, concerns that people have that are kind of global, and it gives me a chance to address them all in one place at one time. So that's generally, I'm fairly informal when it comes to managing, unless there's a problem. I'm very much a performance-based manager. If you're running a department and you're doing a good job, your metrics are good, you're getting everything done you need to do on time, nobody's complaining about your department, and things are running smoothly, I'm going to leave you alone. I'm going to talk to you, but I'm going to basically leave you alone. And if for some reason your department is not functioning, then, I'm going to be sitting down with you and we're going to understand why and figure out, how you correct that. Because ultimately, one of the things a town manager does is facilitates the work of other employees. And obviously the town manager also has to, anytime there's a dispute between employees, the town manager is going to have to kind of intervene, get to the root cause of it, and, make sure that that gets straightened out. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, John, you're up.
Oh, really?
Number 8.
We're sleeping. Number 8. Eric, the town manager serves as Dalton's chief procurement officer. Please tell us about your experience in this area.
Sure. So I think, at least in my experience, the first thing you really need to do is you need to work with the Board of Finance, and you need to figure out what are the policies of the community, what are the policies of the town. About 3 years ago, I went through with our Board of Finance because they didn't really have any solid purchasing policies for anything. And I laid out a draft of what I thought was a reasonable purchasing policy, and then we spent 4 or 5 months discussing that before they came up with the final policy. Once the policy's in place, then my job is simply to execute. And what we've kind of set is basically a 3-tiered system where below a certain dollar value, I'm allowed to just sign contracts or do what we need to do to get projects done. This is something I watched my predecessor in Andover really struggle with, because I'll give you one example. Somebody smashed the window in the community room, and the Board of Selectmen at the time was insisting that they get multiple bids for everything. And, so the town administrator is running around with a bunch of vendors over what is really a $400 or $500 repair. And it's a very inefficient use of time. So I think you spend your energy on the big ticket items, and you hopefully assemble a series of contractors that you trust, and vendors that you trust. So the little stuff you approve without, any major, considerations. But when something gets up and you're spending $3,000 or $5,000 on something, you need to be getting competitive bids and know you're bringing good value for the community. And then currently we have a threshold of around $10,000. Everything above that goes to RFP and goes through a formal RFP process, which I actually think today that's a little low. I would rather see that value a little higher. The other thing I think you have to be very cautious of is sometimes going through a formal RFP process, what you find is you squeeze out the smaller local companies that aren't going to go through the process, and you end up with a lot bigger contractors who aren't necessarily as cost effective. We've had a couple instances where we've gone to RFP, and I essentially said, I know this is crazy, we're getting a number that's not realistic, and found a local guy. And so far the Board of Selectmen has said, if you've gone through a formal process, got all these bids, and then you find somebody else local willing to do it for a lot less, have given me the authority to use them. So I think on larger projects, you have to go through RFP. It's taxpayers' dollars, and you have to treat that with respect because, taxes are taxes. That's generally how I approach it. But again, I'm willing to work with the policies that are in place and work with the Board of Finance. And obviously in different towns, there's a different relationship between who has spending authority and whether it is the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Finance. So that I would need to find out from Dalton how you're doing it now.
A quick follow-up, non-related question to your last question. But you mentioned in a prior conversation with one of the questionnaires, several department heads, but I didn't hear the word in there, police department. Did Andover have a police department?
That's correct. We do not have a police department. Andover, like most of the smaller towns in Connecticut, uses the Connecticut State Police Resident Trooper Program. So we have a resident trooper for the town. which is tough, right? I mean, there's 21 shifts in a week. A resident trooper is only going to cover 5 of them. So beyond that resident trooper, there is 1 state police officer on every shift that covers 3 towns. So it is very minimal, and it has been something that's been very problematic. But so far, the town residents have not shown any willingness to pay for a higher level of police support. We do have the capability to go to a resident trooper and then constables, essentially. With the resident trooper, then we would just upgrade our regular resident trooper to a supervisory resident trooper and then have the constables work under them. But we don't have the support of the public to go to that. So at least at this point, we're stuck with what we have for law enforcement.
Interesting system. Thank you.
It is.
No second.
Yep.
Okay. Town manager is the principal collective bargaining agent with the assistance of a designated member of the select board and town council. Tell us about your experience in labor negotiations with grievance procedures and in negotiating collective bargaining agreements.
Sure. So currently we have 2 unions in the town of Andover. It used to be the Public Works was in one union, and then town hall employees, some town hall employees were in a different union. Prior to me arriving at the position, there was a lot of friction between the old Board of Selectmen and the employees, and a number of additional employees elected to go into either of the 2 unions. So now we have a mishmash. We have the union that covers public works, also has several administrative people in the town hall in that union, and then the other union has the remaining town employees that work over 20 hours a week. I have good relations with both unions. One of the very first things I did as town administrator was first sit down with the stewards of each union and have a frank discussion about where things were and what issues they had with the town, and understand their side of it. And then go the next step, which is reach out to the union representative and do the same thing with him. Because what I didn't want to happen is the first time I sat down and met the union reps, and the union attorneys was when we're sitting in a grievance procedure or, when we're at contract negotiations. So, I'm on a first name basis with both union stewards as well as the union representatives. I think the biggest issue we have had with contract negotiations is we have very small unions, and one of the unions is very responsive and the other one is not. And my suspicion is they're just overworked, but I've really struggled to get them to come to the bargaining table so we can get contracts out in a reasonable manner. And that irritates me because it impacts the employees, and I look at a union rep as being a strong advocate for the employees, and when I can't even get them to show up to negotiate a contract, that's a problem. So while I have good relationships with both, things proceed a lot more slowly than I'm comfortable with. And I wish I could change that, but frankly, I think we're too small from a union perspective for them to give us a whole lot of bandwidth. As far as grievances, in 6 years, I've been grieved on 3 occasions. One was during COVID, and we had a series of recommendations from our Board of Health as to what cleaning we had to do in the town hall. And so I assigned it and I said, okay, we're going to have to do this internally because we have a cleaning staff that's in here one night a week. So, and I can't put this person on payroll and have them here to do the every 3 hour cleanings that we're required to do from the health board. So all the employees except one were okay with it. There was one employee that grieved me over that because she didn't feel like she should have to, be part of the cleaning rotation. And for perspective, I put myself on the list too. So every 13 days, it was my day to cover the town hall and do the every 3 hour cleaning. So I did not exempt any employee. I think the union attorney was quite pissed that she had to come to a meeting for that. In the end, just so everybody could save a little face, I did what we had been talking about doing anyway, which is converting one of our 2 bathrooms to an employee-only bathroom and have one a public bathroom and one an employee bathroom, both unisex, as opposed to before when we had, one, bathroom for men and one bathroom for women. So we came up with a compromise. The union was happy to jump on it because, they got a resolution that they could at least look like they were accomplishing something. The other one, I got grieved over a poor definition in an old contract that basically spelled out how many personal days somebody got. And a person felt they were entitled to 3 days plus 3 hours because they worked 7 hours a day. And the contract said relative to a 8-hour workday. So they felt they should be able to take 3 extra hours more than the 3 personal days they were granted. We did not give in on that, and the union certainly was not going to take us to mediation over that. And the third one involved Public Works, and it was a question of illegally subcontracting work. And it was actually because of something I did personally. We had a storm. A tree came down right down the road from me that took out a cable wire to somebody's house, and the wire was hanging low over the road. Instead of calling Public Works in, I put 3 pieces of tape, construction tape, so everybody could see the low wire over the road, and left it to the next work day. And I was grieved for not calling in Public Works because they should have been the one putting the construction tape up. That one, we didn't give in either. I knew from dealing with our personnel attorney that was a de minimis, case, and that if we went to mediation, we'd win that one anyway. And the union knew that too. So again, we had a couple meetings and we all sat around and discussed it, but that one went away, without any action against the town. So I think the key is if you treat the unions fairly and you treat the employees fairly to begin with, you can really minimize the issues you have. But if you have one person that's going to be a pain, they can initiate grievance procedures for most things. But again, if you've already established a good working relationship with the unions and the union legal representation, then, and they know you're going to bargain in good faith, most things you can make go away. So that's been my experience. Some unions are obviously a lot harder than others. I hear plenty of horror stories from my other town managers about things they've been grieved over. But so far, I've been pretty lucky.
Thank you so much.
Very good.
Yeah.
So the town manager supervises department heads and provides guidance to other municipal boards, committees, and commissions. With respect to your direct reports, please tell us about your experience evaluating staff and whether you believe conducting performance reviews increases job satisfaction and productivity.
So I actually don't think going through formal job review with employees is nearly as effective as having real meaningful ongoing conversations with those same employees. The last thing I want to do is only sit down with an employee every 6 months and talk about what's happened. I want that to be occurring on, ideally at least a weekly basis. So I know things that are coming up, and, my employees have enough trust in me that they'll come to me with issues, before they spill over. And I always tell all my employees, if you think somebody's going to complain about your performance, or you get in an altercation or something happens, I want to know it ahead of time from you before I hear it from the public. So I have done performance evaluations with my public works, with the head of public works, and also with my community center director. But generally speaking, I don't do it once we have an established relationship. I feel that, informal conversation is a lot more effective than sitting down once a month with a checklist and saying, you did the following things, what are your objectives? So I guess that's my personal take on it. I've certainly had to do it plenty of times, both in the military and with other employers, but I prefer a much more informal process than a formal process. If I'm starting to sit down and do formal documentation on an employee, it's usually because their performance is subpar, and I'm starting down the procedure that will eventually lead to, a Laudermill hearing and, a dismissal or some sort of negative action against the employee. I try not to do that very often, but, there are times and places where you have to. And when you are in that situation, you just have to document it. You have to be very honest with the employee. You have to tell them what's happening. You have to give them a chance to respond, and then march right down the disciplinary procedures.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, come on. Eric,
Yes.
are you aware of the ongoing concerns voiced by our residents regarding mining operations by Berkshire Concrete Corporation in Dalton? And from your perspective, what are some of the possible solutions to address this issue?
So, yes, I am aware. I mean, anybody driving through town sees the signs. So I took a little time and started Googling all the newspaper articles that covered it. So you obviously have a dispute with a gravel mining operation. Those tend to get pretty significant community pushback. I'm not really surprised that you're having trouble with that. We're actively in the process of suing the last gravel mining operation in the town that I represent now, because they were refusing to remediate after they took out all the gravel. And we had a planning and zoning approval, and I basically said, no matter what happens, we are getting, you are going to conform to the remediation steps outlined by the commission. We tried very hard to get them to conform without lawyering up, but in the end, that's kind of what it's taken. So our zoning attorney is taking the lead on that. So first of all, I read something that said the Department of Health considered the dust a nuisance and not a health hazard. I mean, first thing is silica exposure is a known environmental hazard, and it's definitely something OSHA should be aware of. So I think, monitoring and understanding, how much silica is being produced and what the actual dust is and what the particle sizes are is kind of crucial, because you really want to make sure you're not putting lots of airborne stuff in that, 1 to 5 micron range that's really dangerous. So I think that, I'm assuming based on what I read, that Gravel operations are a special permit application, and they probably have a yearly or every 6-month renewal, something along that lines. So I would think that you have teeth because you can simply not renew or stall a renewal until you get the compliance that you want. That's one the town is going to have to be working very carefully with whoever your zoning or your land use attorney is, because the nuances of Massachusetts law, I don't know. So, I mean, but it's definitely something, clearly the public is pretty unhappy with it, and the town's going to have to address it in some satisfactory method. Is it likely to be a fast process? No. Anytime you're engaged in litigation, it's going to take a while. But it's obviously something that the community, at least from the outside, seems like it wants. Maybe the board has a better understanding of whether this is a particular interest group that's upset or whether this is the town as a whole. I mean, I think the first thing to do is sit down again with the company itself and see how much voluntary cooperation you can get. And can you put in the monitoring that would assure the public that the conditions aren't hazardous? And if it turns out you can't, then you need to go to the next step and you need to figure out what legal recourse you have. Obviously you're balancing the fact that you have a business in town, and you don't want to screw up the business and you don't want to drive them out of business, but at the same time, you got some pretty significant, pushback from the public, and you need to address that.
Thank you.
Eric, I think we're at the end of our structured questions. We'd like to turn the microphone over to you and have you ask us any questions you'd like about Dalton.
Sure. So first of all, from an outsider, it seems like a really desirable community. And frankly, that's why I applied here and not elsewhere, because I drove through here and I thought this was a community I'd want to live in. So my first question is really what, other than, and we haven't talked about, obviously there's a desire among many to build a new police station, and issues with the existing town hall housing it. And those sound fairly serious. Obviously, mold is not something to screw around with. I was kind of spearheaded condemning our old community center for mold issues because I did not think that was appropriate to be having seniors exposed to that long term. So that part is something I take seriously. That and the dust, which is also a pretty serious concern. What are your concerns as a board? What is it that keeps you up at night as a board relative to Dalton? What challenges do you think there is for this position?
Oh, for one, the volunteers. The cost of a new police station and possible land acquisition.
Sure.
It's a real problem. We have a committee that's been studying the issue and with the goal of making a recommendation to the board of selectmen, but close to a year's gone by and by their own admission, they're stalling. And because of the issues I've just stated. Not many available sites. One of the most available sites, apparently the neighborhood doesn't want it. And private property acquisitions are extremely costly and would add to the overall budgetary or financing price tag. So that's one of our big concerns right now. And of course, the dust is our biggest concern. Certainly, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
one of the things is rising taxes.
Absolutely.
I mean, everything, your fixed costs, we have no control over.
Sure.
It's killing us. Health insurance, you name it. So the sewer that Pittsfield sets the rates for us, we have no say in it,
Sure.
so.
Is there a chance you can, so does Pittsfield have an independent sewer commission? Is there a chance they would allow a resident from this town on the board? Could you get some say in it that way?
No, I don't think
Or
so.
they're not willing to?
They made a big, huge upgrade to their system and they're back charging us, basically.
Sure. Sure. And obviously, the cost of education for most rural communities is, is really driving, a lot of things. That's
Just
never
built
a,
the district that we belong to, regional school district, we just built a new high school, which was at considerable cost, and as Bob said, a reflection on the taxpayers.
sure.
And it was almost 5 years now, or 4 years, but people are still upset about that. So that's why we have to tiptoe cautiously about any new large expenditures.
Sure. I mean, my take on it, and I face the same thing, there is realistically, in the town I live in, there's about 40% of the people that come out to vote will vote down the first 2 or 3 budgets, no matter what happens. So you have about 60% of the remaining that you have to convince, and you have to get a budget that's the majority of them will accept. It's a difficult thing. I can tell you that one of the big hurdles that I faced as a town administrator is that we had a period of probably 13 or 14 years where the town had been in pretty severe austerity mode. And they had let public works staff dwindle from 5 down to 3. They had not invested at all in equipment, and they really hadn't invested in the roads. They just relied strictly on the money that came in that we get from the state in what's called the Town Aid Road Fund. And as a result, there was a huge deficit to make up, and you can't make that up quickly. What I got all the boards and ultimately the public to agree with was a 15-year plan, capital plan for public works, for the roads, and then for town buildings. And I think you need to do the best job you can at explaining to the public what the real issues are so they understand it, and then do everything you can to keep costs down. In my case, the board was very clear they were not going to add any full-time positions to the town, even though we were down to 3 people in public works. And in the end, I made some adjustments in the town hall. We reduced 3 people that were full-time employees down to part-time employees. And we did it at the same time we incorporated technology to try to cover that gap. The biggest one was in our building department. We took a lot of hours collectively out of the building department, which was painful, and it was painful to the public because even though the town hall is open 34 hours a week, there is somebody to deal with your issues in the building department at most 20 hours a week. But we also did it with a software package where you could do all your applications from home. So a lot of the builders liked it, a lot of the individual homeowners didn't. It kind of took a while to socialize that and get everybody used to it. We did the same thing with the tax collector. We reduced our tax collector from full to part-time. And then ultimately, I made my tax collector, essentially do double duty. She is also my admin assistant when she's not being the tax collector, but she's still a part-time employee. So we really leaned out the town hall staff. And the real question was, can we do it in such a way that we time it when people are retiring? So we're not just, saying to the union, hey, this person is going to part-time, and then negotiate over the effects of that. So you kind of got to do it humanely, but you really got to look at staffing levels and see where are there positions where you're overstaffed or understaffed and address that. And that's painful. In a number of cases, I was able to preserve people as full-time jobs by allowing, essentially combining multiple roles into one position to take up as much slack and what they had. I did that in around 3 positions. So it's hard. And, I told the board the reason we're doing this is, we need the capital investment. We can't get around that. And if we're going to keep taxes low and get the capital investment that the town really needs, we're going to have to adjust personnel. And the repercussion of that is we're not going to be able to provide as much services, at least in terms of time. You can still walk down and get your building permit. You just can't do it every single hour the town hall is open. So that's kind of, how I've approached that.
Do you have any further questions for us?
So one of my first questions is there any question that you have that I haven't fully answered or answered to your satisfaction?
Anyone? Tony, you good?
I'm good, thank you, Bob.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll elaborate on one question I had here regarding resources and challenges. In light of a shrinking population and increasing tax burden on less people, how would you address that in this community? Because that's going to be a very real problem with the investments that we're going to need to make over the long term for a new police facility, town hall upgrades and repairs, modernization, ADA compliance, as well as continued efforts to maintain our roadways.
Sure.
How would you address that? That's what keeps me up at night.
Yeah, no, and rightfully so. I mean, I think the first thing is, in terms of the road network, and the road network in most towns is your biggest physical asset. I mean, if you think about a road, a typical road's about $1 million a mile to build from scratch, and to reconstruct is about $500,000 a mile. The kind of traditional way of doing it is you pave 10% of your roads every year, and about the time it's starting to fall apart again, you pave again. Well, that doesn't work anymore, and it doesn't work anymore because the cost of liquid asphalt is too high. So in terms of the road work, you really have to be thinking about pavement preservation. In other words, how do I take this road and how do I do everything possible to prevent me from having to repave or reclaim and repave, which is the single most expensive thing really you can do to a road. So it's really taking that mindset. I don't know whether the town has gone through and come up with any sort of pavement management program, but it seems like that's kind of your first step. Low-hanging fruit, make sure you're crack sealing the roads on a regular basis so you're not getting a lot of water into the subbase. I didn't see a lot of evidence that you chip seal. I know that's wildly unpopular with a lot of people, but that is a very low cost, very high return on your investment pavement management tool. And if we're not doing it now, I think that's something that Dalton, in this day and age, given the cost of roadway, has to consider. The second thing is you have to aggressively go after grant funding. And there's no reason to pay for something with local taxation, if you can get the state or the federal government to pay for it instead, or at least pay for a large portion of it. So that's been where I've been successful, is knocking off a lot of the projects that we want to do with funding. And the other thing is you really have to kind of look at the town en masse and try to wrap your head around all the problems that it has, from culverts to roads to larger bridges. And once you know and you have a master list of everything you have to deal with, then you basically set priorities and and you work down that list as fast as you can, but you also try to fund as much as you can from external sources.
Thank you.
Anyone else? We're good, you good?
I'm good. If you guys are good, I'm good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you very much, Eric.
Thank you, Eric. Pleasure to meet you.
Tony, I'd shake your hand, but
A long way, a way past.
nice to meet you all. And whatever you decide, I wish us all the best of luck.
Thank you so much.
Have a safe drive home, sir.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce John Elwell. John is most recently the general manager of the Light and Vermont Electric Department. John Elwell, have a seat, please.
John?
Hi, John. Terry Williams, interim town manager.
Here. Hi, John. Dan Esco, select board member.
Hey, John Boyle, select board member.
We got one back in Spain, talking back a little. He's on
Spain.
So you didn't watch it?
See me?
Tony's there. I can see you. Hello. Good evening.
Hi.
Should I sit on the side here?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, right there, John. Jonathan, how would you like to be addressed?
Perfect.
John is fine. I'm not that formal.
Okay, we all set to go? We all set down?
Yep, I'm all set.
Okay, thanks for coming tonight.
Thank
Can you
you.
give us a brief introduction statement that you'd like to make to the board?
Sure. Well, I appreciate you guys having me here tonight. It's a lovely town, Dalton. I've been here a couple of times now, come down early so I could look around and, get myself better acquainted with the community, the assets that you have here, and just take a look around, get familiar with businesses and stuff, where the town hall is, where emergency services are, things of that nature. So I really appreciate you guys giving me the time to come in here and talk to you tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, yes.
John, could you please tell us what you see as Dalton's greatest resources and also, likewise, challenges, and how you as town manager would go about utilizing such resources and addressing our challenges?
Yeah, I think that Dalton's greatest resources are, number one, I want to say, and this is a testament to the people that are here tonight, from what I have seen, people I've talked to around the community, looking at minutes, watching videos of board meetings here, you have a lot of public engagement. And that's really important, especially in these times in our nation's history. It's very difficult to get citizen participation and activity in public issues in general, whatever it is. And I have seen in my research that you guys seem to have a lot of public participation, even tonight, even though folks here know that they can't really ask questions or, say anything directly to folks. They want to know what's going on. So I think that your residents are a really big asset in this community. I can tell that they want to be involved and they want to see things happen in this community, and they're willing to pitch in and get their hands dirty to try and see good change here. Another great resource I think that you guys have is the landscape here. You've got some beautiful land around Dalton, and I think that over time you can use that to your advantage. There's all sorts of things you can use land for. You can use it for the natural resources that exist there, but you can also tap into it for its beauty as well. And ecotourism is, I'm sure you guys are aware, is a real thing now. It's not, for a while it was just sort of a buzzword, but people really do travel now in our society and in other parts of the globe as well, to go to places that are particularly attractive, that have nice amenities to them. And I think that in time, Dalton could tap into that resource here as well. You've got a beautiful town here, really beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How about financial challenges? I asked this kind of as a follow-up at the end of the last interview, but I can just tack it onto this, I think, and I'll do the same for the next candidate. With a shrinking population or declining population, shrinking tax base, how would you address that to meet the needs of the towns, particularly with the investments that we have ahead of us for a police station, potential public safety building, our infrastructure, our roads, as well as our aging town hall that needs modernization and being brought up to ADA compliance, for example?
Yeah, there are no easy solutions to those kinds of questions. And as you guys know, Massachusetts has Proposition 2.5 here, which restricts municipalities' ability to levy taxes to raise funds. So that's, a difficult situation for sure. I think that probably more and more grants are going to have to be not the whole solution, but they're going to have to be a part of the solution. I think the municipality of Dalton is probably going to have to tap into grants more and more in order to fund the types of projects that they want to see done. For example, you mentioned restoration of the town hall building.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's a public building, there are potentially a lot of grant resources out there to help with renovations to a facility like that. You may need to start looking at expanding building areas at least for residences. You've got a pretty tight commercial area. You've got a really nice traditional historic downtown. But I've noticed that a lot of the buildings are also underutilized. If you can tap into some of the spaces in these buildings that are underutilized, bring good uses to second floors, third floors. Maybe there's places in town that are not even being used at all, that are vacant or close to vacant. And there are ways in which communities can help to prop up private business owners, especially in traditional downtown areas as well. And if you're working in a traditional downtown area, because of the age of the buildings in those areas, oftentimes grant resources can be brought to the table as well, even if the buildings are privately owned. As long as the municipality is willing to, step in and shepherd the grant, almost always you'll still need to be the applicant and a grant source. So you still kind of get, at the end of the day, you get stuck holding the bag on the grant and taking care of it and, doing the paperwork, the administration work for it. But it can be applied to privately owned buildings in some cases. Got to be creative with it. It depends on the situation, but it's not unheard of. So there's a couple of ways I think that the community can start to try and bring more revenue into the municipality to bridge those gaps that I've been told you guys are getting real close to in this community. So, and I certainly would want to talk to staff here as well. I'm sure, especially for the finance department, this has probably been weighing on them for a while now, and some of them may have some good ideas too, and I certainly would want to hear any ideas that any staff members have about ways we can get creative and bridge the funding gaps in the community so that people aren't being hit so hard financially by the things that need to get done in order to bring Dalton, further into the 21st century. We're well into the 21st century now, but I think we all know there's going to be a lot of changes in our society over the next 20 to 30 years, and Dalton needs to keep pace with that.
Thank you.
Okay, I think Tony's.
Okay, John, on the heels of that question and your answer, could you please describe a successful grant proposal you've written, detailing your role, the process, how you aligned it with the funder's priorities, and any challenges you faced and the outcome?
Okay, one that I specifically have written as opposed to being administrator for or spearheading? Am I understanding that correctly?
Correct.
Okay. Off the top of my head, a project that I wrote the grant for and we were able to successfully complete was when I was working for the town of Rockingham, Vermont. I was the community development director in that capacity with the town of Rockingham. And the town's library needed a lot of work. It's not a new story, all across New England, I think. A lot of municipal infrastructure, whether it's library, town hall, fire station, police station. Buildings need help. A lot of these buildings were built a long time ago, and sometimes communities have found it difficult to keep up with the maintenance, and then it gets to a critical point where you need to do something. This was starting to happen in Rockingham with their library. So in that case, I wrote a grant to help with some of the interior renovations that were needed for the library. This involved replacement of the carpet in some areas, painting walls. Also, there was some lead paint removal that needed to be done before the actual painting could take place as well. There was work needed around some of the like molding and stuff. It had kind of nice molding around the walls and edges of the windows on the interior of the building. A lot of that had fallen into disrepair, needed to be replaced. Off the top of my head, that's what I can remember with that project, and it was successful. We did receive the grant and ultimately completed all of the work that was scheduled to be done for the library.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
John, as a new town manager, how would you evaluate the current effectiveness and efficiencies of the various town departments, and how would you approach making any changes you deem necessary?
So you're talking about the way things get done in a specific department? If I saw something that needed more efficiencies or something? First, I would want to meet with the department head, whichever department it was, have a discussion with that person about what I was seeing, my concerns, and give an explanation as to why I felt a change was needed, and then explain the changes that I would like to make. I would also want to hear feedback from the department head as well, because being their department, obviously, it's going to affect them directly, and hopefully they're in agreement with what I'm saying, but you don't know. Maybe they have some other ideas about it, or maybe they have some other ideas about the efficiencies that I'm concerned about and may have another way to do it that's even better than what I thought of. You never know, could happen. So I would want to have those discussions first with the department head. Once we're in agreement about what was going to take place, then we would meet with other people in the department to explain the change in procedure, process, why we feel it's important to do it, to try and get everybody's buy-in on it. I think it's important to get people's buy-in in a department, because if you have people that are upset about it, they're probably going to be resistant and maybe not enthusiastic and maybe try to scuttle the change, whatever it is that you're asking for. So I think it's real important to try and get everybody's buy-in first, if you can. Maybe you can't get everybody. Maybe you're going to have some people that just think you're wrong. But at the same time, if you feel you're right and nobody has convinced you otherwise, then I feel as a leader in the community, you need to stick to your guns and at least try it. If you think that there are efficiencies to be had out of this change, let's try it. Let's see what happens. If it doesn't work, okay, let's, give it 6 months or give it a year. If it doesn't work well, all right, maybe we go back to the way it was previously. But, as a leader, I think it's important, if you feel that there is a way to bring a better way to do something to the table, to bring it up and give it a shot with folks.
Thank you.
Okay. Good, John?
No.
Please tell us about your greatest strength and about your greatest weakness.
Well, I guess I would say my greatest strength is a willingness to take risks. And that can, be a double-edged sword sometimes, and I realize that. But you need to be able to shoulder that responsibility, and you need to be willing to accept the outcome on occasion when you feel something's worth it, and take a risk. Try something different. Try something that may have a significant payback for a community or whoever you're working for. And I think that's true about life in general. If you think it through and have a good strategy, then there is a real good possibility for large returns. But you got to think it through. When I say being willing to take risks, I don't mean silly risks. You're in charge of other people's money when you're a municipal manager, and you're answerable to everybody in the community, ultimately. And I don't take that lightly. So you got to think things through. You got to be very sure that you're going to be able to do what you think you can do, whatever it is, whether it's a particular grant project that you're going to end up spending a lot of time and resources on, but hopefully, if it's going to renovate a really important building in your downtown area, it could be the spark that turns everything around. High risk, high reward. Greatest weakness, I would say, I think maybe I sometimes had wished I had talked to more people before making changes internally in an organization. Not that anything ever went horribly wrong, but I can recall some times where I made some changes, thought I had talked to enough people, but then found out there were a couple of people I didn't talk to that were upset I didn't go to them, and at least let them know that this was coming down the pike, and they felt their feelings were hurt a little bit. they felt like they had been left out. And that made me feel a little bad because it's never a slight against anybody. I think there have been a couple of times where I felt like maybe I should have gone to a couple extra more people before, pulling the trigger on a particular move I was doing. So I'd say that was a little bit of a weakness that I have, probably prompted by just being eager to get things moving.
Okay, thank you.
So John, the town manager is responsible for preparing and presenting the town's annual operating budget as well as its capital budget to the finance committee and select board. Please tell us about your experience with budgeting, preferably in a municipal environment.
Certainly. I've been involved in budgeting at different levels over my career. I assume you guys have my resume and have looked at it. So, I've been the low man on the totem pole. I've been a department head, and I've been manager too. So I've got experience at a number of different levels working for municipalities. When I was a department head, I would just do my budget for my department, and I was responsible for submitting that to the manager for the manager's review of it, any critiquing that the manager wanted to do until we got it to a point where we were both happy with it, at least for the first draft, for the select board to review. And as a manager, I've worked with a lot of different department heads on different services. And my approach in budgeting as a manager has not really been to micromanage that. All the municipalities I've worked at, I have felt had strong finance departments and strong financial staff in them. I never felt the need to get in and micromanage people on that level. Unless I saw something that was clearly not right, not going right, then obviously you need to step in and say, hey, wait a minute, this isn't right, what happened here? Let's get to the bottom of this. But unless you see something like that, I am fine with allowing department heads to put together a draft for my review as manager. I will then meet with the department heads and go through their budgets line item by line item with them, discuss them, figure out, what is the best way to finance specific projects that they may have in there. If there are, some large ticket items that we're planning on presenting to the select board for their consideration that year. And let's get it to a point where we all feel comfortable with it. Myself, the department head, the finance director, everyone. It's uneasy when you present a budget to a board that you don't feel you can stand fully behind yourself. And it doesn't mean there won't necessarily be things in there that are challenging and are really going to take you to task. There probably will be every year. And, sometimes those things come from the select board too. I want the select board's participation in the budget process as well. And in places that I've worked as a manager, I have always asked the select board too, as we're approaching the budgeting season, okay, you guys know this is coming up, and maybe the board has told me some things earlier in the year, and you got to pay attention to that. If the board says, oh yeah, we want that in the budget for next year, you got to make a note of that, keep track of it so you're following that, and then when budgeting season comes around, you're working on that and you're going to have it incorporated in your first draft to the board. But there may be possibilities where board members have been kind of sitting, thinking about things, and have a particular project in mind, but have never actually brought it up in a board meeting before. So I always give the board an opportunity before they see any first draft of a budget to tell me if there's anything that has been on their mind that they want to see in the budget. Whether it's a project, you got a particular renovation on a building or sidewalks or roads, whatever it is, or whether it's, a purchase, if, you feel a new vehicle needs to be purchased the upcoming year because the one that particular staff member has been using is, it's reached the end of its lifetime and you've noticed that and you'd like to see it changed. I give the board an opportunity to tell me what's on their mind and if there are any particular projects or expenses they want to see incorporated in that first draft. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. And sometimes board members have changed their mind, once they've actually seen the figures and seen how it's going to impact the budget. I've seen that a number of times in my career where, the board has said, well, we want to see this. You go out, you get the numbers, you budget for it, you've got the documentation in place so you can show them, well, this is where the numbers come from. We didn't make this up. So you need to be aware, if this is important to you, this is what it's going to look like on the budget, on the grand list. So sometimes after a board looks at that, they may say, okay, well, it's important, but not this year. Let's look at it again next year. So that's kind of my process. And then obviously you bring a budget back to the board as often as you can until you get to the deadline where, you've got to get things posted and get it printed in the annual report and put to bed. Unless the board's happy right off the bat with the first draft, which is not very likely. Most boards want to look at least a couple of times before they're totally happy with the budget. So does that give a good explanation?
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, John, could you please describe your role and relationship with department heads in previous positions and how you would establish a leadership position and promote communication and teamwork with and across departments?
Yes. I think it's really important to have a good relationship with all of your department heads. They're your eyes and ears for everything that's going on in that particular area of your local government that you're overseeing. So I like to work closely with department heads. It's not to say I'm trying to micromanage them, but I do want to know what's going on in their departments. Communication is very important in that. I like to hold department head meetings at least once a month. If necessary, you could do it every other month too, but I think at least once a month is a good thing for a manager and department heads to do together. And that sort of gives everybody an opportunity to communicate with each other. So not just with the manager, but also with each other as department heads as well. It may seem, like an obvious thing, but I will tell you, I have often seen municipalities where departments aren't really always communicating with each other very well, and that's unfortunate. Not only at local government level, I can tell you, it goes on in state government and the federal government too. No doubt about it. And I don't want to see that in a municipality that I'm managing. I want people to be familiar with each other, and I want them to know what's going on in different parts of the municipality too. The more education you can get for yourself about what's happening in your community, the better off everybody is going to be. You need to share knowledge. That's important. And sometimes really interesting conversations can come out of department head meetings, where you get somebody that says, oh, we're going to be doing this project. Maybe it's a sewer line project, and, maybe police department didn't know about that. And they say, oh, geez, well, that's good. I'm glad you brought that up. Good for us to know. Do you need any assistance with that? Do you need a flagger or any help with that? Even if you don't, it's good for us to know that, as law enforcement, that there's going to be a major sewer line project taking place from, May to June next year on XYZ street. That's good for law enforcement to know that, so it's a good way to keep everybody in the loop with what's happening with one another. I also think that emails can be a really effective communication tool. Sometimes, you don't have the ability to, get a full-scale meeting together to talk about things, but there's something important, something critical that has happened, and you need to get the word out quickly to your staff. Emails are great for that. Doesn't even have to be long. It can be, 3-4 sentences. I want you guys to be aware of this, this, and this. It happened on XYZ date. Be aware of it. Keep a copy of this email in your files. This may come up later at a different time. Just so they got that knowledge out there. So I often will communicate with department heads too a lot through emails.
Thank you.
Okay, John. Oh, it's right there. John, the town manager serves as Dalton's chief procurement officer. Please tell us about your experience in this area.
Yeah, I have to admit that I know Massachusetts has some particular statutes on procurement and how procurement has to be done in Massachusetts. Not having worked in Massachusetts before, I know that's an area I'm going to have to get brushed up on and learn about that. Both in Maine and Vermont, where I have worked as manager, your procurement, unless you're involved in a federal project or a project that has federal funding, your procurement process is really dictated by your charter, by your municipal charter. So that's kind of that's your Bible in those two states for what rules you have to follow for procurement. But I know in Massachusetts it's a different system, and there are some state statutes that come into play. So I need to get educated on what those statutes are that dictate the procurement policy in the state of Massachusetts.
Good.
But I have been involved in both Maine and Vermont and procurement of many different things for a municipality. So I'm confident, I can learn pretty quickly what the rules and the laws are in Massachusetts for that, but I would need to study up on it.
Thanks.
You all set, John?
Yeah.
Okay. John, the town manager is the principal collecting bargaining agent with the assistance of a designated member of the select board and town council. Tell us about your experience in labor negotiations with grievance procedures in negotiating collecting bargaining agreements.
Sure. I do have experience of that nature, both with Enosburg and with Linden. Those two municipalities were union municipalities. In Enosburg, I negotiated, I believe, 5 full contracts and 1 partial union contract. In Linden, I negotiated 1 full contract and 1 partial contract. So I've got, in my experience, I've got 6 full union contracts that I've negotiated and 3 partial union contracts. The partials had to do with salaries, but only salary. They wanted to re-examine the salaries, and so we ended up doing that and renegotiated just the salaries alone on the partials that I'm referring to. The union itself, in both those municipalities, it was the same union, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. Both of those municipalities had municipally owned electric utilities in them, and that's why the union was IBEW for short. But just so you're aware, in Enosburg, it wasn't just the electrical workers that I was negotiating contracts with, because IBEW, although their name would lead you to believe it's just for electrical workers only, they actually allowed all the members, excluding management, of course, but all the members of the municipality, regardless of what department you were in, to be part of that union. So, you know, we had highway department, wastewater, you know, water department. There were other departments that were in the union, even though it was still called International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. So I wanted to point that out to you, just so you're aware that I have been involved in negotiating union contracts in departments outside of just an electric department.
John, the town manager supervises department heads and provides guidance to other municipal boards, committees, and commissions. But with respect to your direct reports, please tell us about your experience evaluating staff and whether you believe conducting performance reviews increases job satisfaction and productivity.
Ultimately, I do, yeah. I am a strong believer in doing it at least an annual evaluation, a written evaluation. And not just for department heads, I also believe that, you know, all employees should receive an annual evaluation. You should get feedback as to how you're doing, you know, the good and the bad, areas you can improve, but also, you know, hey, give an employee a pat on the back if they deserve it too. You know, it shouldn't be a beat down. You know, that's not the purpose of doing an annual evaluation for an employer. At least it shouldn't be, in my opinion. You know, it's an opportunity to exchange ideas between your supervisor and an employee, whoever their direct supervisor is, and the employee. And, you know, have a one-on-one discussion about how things are going. You know, are they happy? You know, are there ideas that they have about ways that they could make their jobs better? You know, better for themselves and better for the municipality too? Well, let's hear them. That's great. Those are great discussions to have, you know. And during the evaluation, I think it is important, as I said, to, you know, not just focus on, you know, all the good or all the bad. It should be both. You know, nobody's perfect. There are always areas a person can improve and do things a little better. And I think it's important to point that out to them. You know, maybe they made a mistake on something that was a little egregious. Hopefully not too bad, but as their direct supervisor, you saw it, you noticed it, and you need to tell that employee, hey, look, I know you didn't do it on purpose. but this happened, we can't have it happen again, okay? So I made a mention of it in here, but, you know, I'm not trying to club you over the head with it. Just try and do better next time, and if you got a question, if you're not certain about the correct way to do something, come and see me, let's talk about it, you know, before a mistake is made. But also, you know, prop them up too, you know, these are difficult jobs, you know, they're all difficult jobs, all of them. And I think supervisors need to be supportive of the employees that work for them. So give them compliments too. You should do that whenever you see someone do something good anyway. You know, you don't have to wait for the annual evaluation to do that. You see somebody doing a good job on something, tell them. But I think it's good to also put it in writing for them as well, so they can see that and they're getting credit and merit for that as well. So, and I think that goes straight across the board. And I think the manager should be giving department heads annual evaluations as well, at least. You know, if there's a problem going on, and you got a problem situation, you know, maybe you're doing it more than once a year. Maybe you're also giving them a 6-month evaluation or something to let them know, okay, we got to work on this issue, and I want to check back in with you in another 6 months and see how we're doing. Are things getting better? Hopefully they are. You know, if they're not, okay, well, let's come up with some new plans of attacks then. We've got to correct this problem here, whatever it is. So, yeah, so it's a little long-winded, I'm sorry, but I am supportive of doing evaluations with employees. I think it's a good thing, and I do think they should be in writing.
Thank you.
Okay, John, are you aware of the ongoing concerns voiced by our residents regarding mining operations by Berkshire Concrete Corporation in Dalton? And from your perspective, what are some of the possible solutions to address this issue?
Yes, I am aware of it. I first became kind of residually aware of it when I saw the postings around town last weekend when I came down to visit Dalton. Wasn't exactly sure what it was about, though. I just saw, you know, the signs that say stop the permitting, stop the dust, or something to that effect. But then I watched your last regular select board meeting, and I think that was from the September 22nd date, if I'm remembering correctly. And you guys had a pretty lively discussion about that issue that I watched on video. So that's how I then got a little bit of education about what the posters were about. And obviously I don't know everything about it yet. If I became municipal manager, I would have to dive right into that, obviously, because it's an issue that's obviously troubling a lot of people. It's taking up time at select board meetings, and one way or another, there needs to be some resolution to it. One thing I noted was that apparently nobody's quite sure what the actual health threat is from the sandblasting. And I understood in watching the video that the state was asked to come in and take some samples, but the samples haven't actually been tested yet. And my understanding is that the determining factor as to whether it's a health threat or not is whether there's any silicates in the sand. That's apparently the harmful material that might potentially be in the sand that's dangerous to inhale. So I think, you know, this is probably going to be a fairly long process. I don't think it's something that's going to get resolved in the next month or two. And you're going to need to make sure you're touching all the bases as you go through the process. once you get the results from the testing of the sand, that's going to determine, your course of action and what path as municipality you're going to be going down. But there may still be some difficulties in either way, even if it comes back negative and says there's no silicates in the sand. There may still be some pushback, quite honestly, from some residents. I could see that some people were obviously very passionate about this. And you can't just ignore that either. They're people, they live here, and if they have a concern, they may still want to continue to come to board meetings and voice those concerns. So I think it will be a challenge either way. Obviously, the property owner, Berkshire Concrete, is also going to have to play a major role in this. If there is a problem, they are the ones that are creating the problem. And I believe also, most likely, the state of Massachusetts is going to have to play a role in this too, if there are corrections that need to get made. So I don't have the answer as to, what the solution to this is going to be. I don't think anybody has the solution to this yet, because it's unknown at this time how serious the problem actually is, if there is a problem. I think, though, that the community, the municipality, needs to make sure it's touching all the bases in correct order as it goes through the process of trying to figure out whether there is a problem. And then whether there is or whether there isn't, make sure they continue down the correct path to try to get resolution to this. So, and I can say I would be dedicated to that path, obviously under the guidance of the select board. They will also have to play a large role in this, in making sure that we handle this situation as best we can, all things considered.
Thank you.
John, you answered all the board's questions with a great deal of thoughtfulness and expertise. It's your turn. Do you have any questions for the board?
Yeah, I do. When I was reading the annual report, I noted that there were some projects that were supposed to be done in fiscal year '24 that were not able to get completed and were going to be carried over into '25. I talked with the hiring committee a little bit about this. They seem to feel that the projects that got carried over were ultimately completed. But I want to check with the select board, since I have some FaceTime with you right now, and make sure you feel the same way. Were the projects that were supposed to be completed in '25 done to your satisfaction? And if not, is there anything I need to know, just so if I am chosen as your new manager, I would know then to make sure I'm getting those projects on the front burner, as quickly as possible for next year. Were these projects completed, everything completed in '25 to your satisfaction?
Yes.
Okay, and I noted there was one particular pretty big one on Orchard Road.
That is
Yeah.
done, yeah.
Yeah.
Our highway superintendent got $1 million grant for that.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Good job for him. That's excellent.
Yeah,
Hats off to him.
outstanding.
Yeah.
There was one that was supposed to be completed previous fiscal year, which was the engineering for the Dalton Division Road sewer, but we just authorized additional funding or
Yeah.
funding to reauthorize that project, I believe. It was not completed, so
That's right.
Yeah.
that was one.
And of those, there was one project that was in that category, got pushed into another year that the committee wasn't sure of. And it had to do, I don't know exactly all the details of what it was, but it was referred to as the roof refurbishment on the garage.
For the town garage?
Yeah,
Yes, I believe that was done.
that was done, okay.
Yeah, we use ARPA funds for that.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. And then I think lastly, I would just ask as a heads up, because I know that you guys are going to be getting into budgeting fairly soon. And you don't have to tip your hat to me or, the public right now if you don't want to, but if you are willing, are there some projects that are on your mind that whoever your new manager is, you would want them to be aware of and start working on as soon as the budget process begins?
Go ahead, Jack.
No, I don't think there's anything significant in fiscal '26. But we do face some major capital funded projects 2 or 3 years down the road here, such as a police department, a sewer on Dalton Division Road, and there was something else. So,
There's gonna be some of the schools that need roofs replacements
Yeah.
also.
yeah, we belong to a school district here. And, yeah, nothing big next year, I don't think. Really? Is there anything we're overlooking?
There doesn't appear to be anything that's pressing at this time that we don't see coming.
John Dalton, chairman of our finance committee.
Back on the hot seat again.
Hey, come on. He's the big bucks for.
At this point, there aren't, the only kind of pressing thing is the climate control taking place primarily in the police department area. Down that we're I'm hoping that we can move along with that relatively soon. But we're working on that one.
Yeah.
That's a kind of a work in progress.
Thanks, Bill.
Do you have any other questions, John? for us?
I don't think so right now. I think those were the questions I had for you guys, and I appreciate you so thoroughly answering them for me.
Well, thank you, Jack, for coming down from Vermont, right? What
Yeah.
part of Vermont?
I live in a small town called Kirby.
Yeah, way up there, in the middle? Or?
Pretty far. It's in the northeastern part of the state, in the region that Vermonters affectionately refer to as the Northeast Kingdom.
Yeah, I've heard it.
Yeah. Do you know where St. Johnsbury is?
Right.
Heard about that? Okay. So Kirby is the next town east of St. Johnsbury, if that gives you sort of an idea.
Wow, must be on the New Hampshire line.
Pretty close.
There's a bridge there, right?
What's that?
Is there a bridge that goes over the river to New Hampshire?
To New Hampshire?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there's lots of bridges that,
Yeah, but right there in Johnsbury.
in St. Johnsbury, no, because St. Johnsbury isn't actually on the New Hampshire border.
Okay.
It's one town in.
Yeah.
It's one town in from the New Hampshire border, but the closest bridge to New Hampshire from St. Johnsbury is in a town called Waterford. And there's a bridge from Waterford, Vermont to Littleton, New Hampshire.
Well, that's a beautiful area too.
Yeah,
I appreciate you coming all the way down here.
and this is a beautiful area here too. You guys should be very, very proud of this area. You have a very beautiful community here.
You know, we're very lucky. The Berkshires are a great spot, a lot of culture, in South County in particular. So we're lucky to kind of, not live in the super high-end houses. It's a little more, normal. But you can easily go down and take advantage of music, theater, all sorts of things.
Yeah,
We gotta take a break, John, and then we got our next appointment. Thank you for coming.
yeah. Thank you guys. Appreciate your time tonight.
John, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
And great to meet you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
Take you through the state.
Yeah, thank you, John. Thank you. Good to meet you.
Hey, little break again. Tony, a little break for one of like.
Great, thank you.
Hey, Tony, how long did it go? Yeah, I know.
You're all set?
Yeah, ready. We give it help. Let's run this place.
Okay.
All right.
Buzz, we're all set.
Mr. Chairman, you ready? The next candidate is Lisa. Lisa Black. Lisa, come on up. Lisa most recently was a school business administrator for the North Berkshire School Union. Lisa, have a seat.
Hey, Lisa, good to see you.
Lisa Danesco, select board member.
John Boyle, board member.
So that's it.
Oh, yeah, it's having trouble with the video. Yeah, it's like 4 in the morning.
Oh, we took a nap.
Good.
Okay, Lisa, it's good to meet you. You want to be addressed as Lisa or any other?
Lisa is fine.
Okay.
I've been called a lot worse.
Don't feel alone.
Okay, Lisa, we'll get right into this. Thanks for coming tonight. Do you have a brief introductory statement you want to make to the board?
I'm Lisa Blackmer. I've lived in Berkshire County for the last close to 40 years. I'm a Western Mass resident, Berkshire native. I love the community. I love the public municipal government, public service, and I'd love to be your town manager.
Okay, thank you.
Lisa, can you tell us what you see as Dalton's greatest resources or assets, and likewise, the greatest challenges, and how you as town manager would go about utilizing our assets and resources to address our challenges?
Your greatest resources are always your people, your residents, the people that are committed to the community, whether they're on a board or they're coaching Little League or softball, on the PTG or the PTA, whatever you happen to call it. And the people that own businesses and employ residents, that's always your strongest resource. You've got a nice town, you've got a lot of natural resources, which people are very attracted to. You've got a nice, relatively safe community. I say pretty much most places around here are safe. And so your challenges are the same challenges that most municipalities in Massachusetts, particularly in Berkshire County, are facing. Increasing demand for services and money. As far as health insurance, uncontrolled costs increases in some cases. Fighting against an aging population and a shrinking population, trying to pay those bills. And then in your case, you need a new public safety building. Again, not really unique either, because our communities are kind of so old, because we're the oldest part of the country, that as our towns started building municipal buildings a long time ago, they're all starting to age and fall apart. You also have to handle the former high school. I know the town's wish is to turn that into housing. You have infrastructure concerns pretty much like everybody else does. So I think those are your biggest challenges.
And any ideas how we might address, maybe one or two of those?
I think you're gonna have to borrow for the public safety building.
Okay.
Unless somebody donates, a few million or more. More than a few million, but the last time we looked at North Adams, it was like 36 million, so I'm guessing it's probably close to 60 at this point. But one of the ways is to be, like the governor and the lieutenant governor and the legislation, they've added $100 million to the Chapter 90 money that's specifically focused on rural aid. We need to make sure that we get our share of that. And I think that that's one of the other things that part of solving it is making sure we have a voice. I know the new state rep is pretty vocal about what she wants and needs. I have a good relationship with her. I have a good relationship with Senator Mark. I have a good like I said, I'm on a hug basis with the lieutenant governor and the former lieutenant governor. I think sometimes making sure that our voices in Western Mass and our smaller communities in Berkshire County are heard and make sure that we're getting our fair share. I think that's a challenge right now because everybody's worried what's going to happen at the federal level, so they're not quite sure how they're going to spend and what money might be clawed back or just not going to be there in the future. You've got a new accountant, so that's another challenge with that person's onboarding and training. How you solve it, it's going to be a manner of trying to manage the finances, not increasing the taxes too much because we do have aging population and people don't want to and or can't afford to increase what they pay. But I do think a lot of is planning. I know that you passed the bylaw or rule policy to have a capital plan. I think that's helpful because it lets you know what you need what the expenses are, and then you can have a 5 or 10 year plan of how to pace that out. I know that there's a road pavement management program where it tells you which roads, that way it gets out of the politics, which roads are in which shape, and it's a data analysis of how you prioritize your road building. And yeah, okay, so I thought you did. And then you use that way when somebody says, why isn't my street being paved? And you say, well, this street, and this street have a score of this, and your score is this, so we need to do that first. I think that's how you do it, and there's no magic bullet that's going to solve everything. You just try, and you ask for money everywhere you can.
Thank you very much. I had a follow-up question on that that I asked the first candidate at the very end. They asked if there was something I didn't ask. So then I decided I'll add this question to the beginning. And so you kind of touched on it. So we have a decreasing population and a tax burden that's being shared amongst less people. So you did touch on some of this, I think, in your answer, but what would you do to address, you had said increasing demands for resources, right, with less resources to do it with. Any specific strategies that you could bring to light here?
One of the things, the MMA is holding a health insurance cost summit tomorrow morning. I have to leave the house at 5:30. It doesn't involve a passport or a bathing suit. Those were generally my rules for that early. But I think that's one issue, and I think one of the things we have to look at is our plan design and what we can do to save money and then to incentivize healthier behaviors so that maybe our costs aren't as high. That's one thing we can do. Sometimes regionalization. I know you looked at regionalizing the police department, but that didn't end up working. But I think that we have to start looking, all the small communities have to really look at what they can, and sometimes it doesn't necessarily reduce the cost. What it does is it increases services. But sometimes look at what could possibly be done with, whether it's Windsor or it's Peru or even some of the smaller communities around here. And you guys have been part of the Veterans Service Agent forever. I think you were with Pittsfield, then you were with North Adams, and now you're back with Pittsfield. But that was a great example of regionalization that worked and helped everybody find, one, getting qualified candidates for every single town. When you want to hire somebody for 10 hours, it's hard to find somebody. So by regionalizing, that was a good example of what worked. And I would think I would be looking at other examples.
Nice. Thank you very much for the specific examples.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, Lisa, good evening. Could you please describe a successful grant proposal you've written, detailing your role, the process, how you aligned it with the funder's priorities, and any challenges you faced and the outcome.
I wrote a strap grant for over 900,000. It was in 2015, so I don't remember the exact dollar amount. Our bridge was failing in Sandusfield. We had to make it a one-way bridge. Sandusfield is geographically the largest community in Berkshire County. It was a 14-mile reroute for the school buses. Luckily, at the time, we had, and they still do, but we had 2 fire stations, one on each side of the bridge, so that we didn't have to worry about fire service, because that could have been a real issue. But we wrote the grant, we got people signed on from the other communities supporting it. We got our state rep and our state senator to include it, to write their letter of support. I've yet to have anybody turn down a letter of support, but you have to ask. And we submitted it, and they got the grant, and they fixed the bridge, and now you can go over it. And that was, and it's a competitive grant. The STRAP grant isn't guaranteed. It's not like some of the cities that have community development block grant. Pittsfield's they're an entitlement community for the community development block grants. North Adams is a mini entitlement, but most of the other communities in Berkshire County have to apply, and it's competitive. So a lot of times you'll put in for a regional grant. Buckland and Shelburne Falls, where I worked, we did a regional one, but they outsourced that to a consultant. Also, when the Community Compact Program came out with the Baker Polito administration, Sandusfield was an early adopter. I wrote the proposals of what we wanted that included, one of them, big one, was financial policies. We didn't really have any as to how much we wanted for free cash, how much we wanted in stabilization, what were even cash handling policies, things where we were getting, before I was there, they got nailed for a few times with the police department not doing turnovers in a timely manner. So we set all those policies in writing, and then that was one of the acknowledgments they had as part of their community compact, which was also very helpful, because after I left, there were some issues with some staff, and they were able to say, here's our policy, and this is the situation, and this is how we're moving forward based on our policy.
Thank you.
Lisa, as the new town manager, how would you evaluate the current structure, the effectiveness and efficiencies of the various town departments? And how would you approach making any changes you deem necessary?
I would meet with all the department heads and the department staff. I would look at reports, whether it's expenses, whatever we have for data. I would, a lot of times people come in and they want to change things just to change things. And that's always up against, we don't want to change because we've always done it that way. So I always try and understand why something is done a certain way. Sometimes there's duplicate efforts, but there's a reason, because if this system fails, you've still got that system, and I would want to understand that before I say it's better to do it this way. I would also try and get buy-in, explain, is there a better way? I would ask them, what do you think we could do better? Because they might have an idea that they didn't want to bring up to anybody, or they didn't think somebody would listen. So I would ask, what do you think? And I would listen and say, why do you think that? And then I would ask them, what are the challenges and why hasn't that happened, if they think it's important. And I think that helps, one, get buy-in, because I'm listening to people. And then if something has to change, sometimes you have to change things because state law says, the post commission has changed a lot of things. The requirements for firefighters, I know you don't have a town fire department, but it's another example of a lot of things that have changed. Some of the things in municipal finance have changed, some for the better, some not so much, like reducing the interest rate on tax title. But so sometimes things have to change because they have to change, and sometimes they have to change because there's a better way to do that. And I would, again, I'd be data-driven. Is it more efficient? Does it provide better customer service? I was always, when I worked in Buckland, I was at town hall at 7 o'clock, even though we weren't open till 8. And when the taxes were due, a lot of times I'd have my window open, and they would kind of come, and I was on the first floor. People would come to my window, I have my payment, can you take it? But, so you adapt for what's needed, and I generally prioritize based on potential revenue or potential lost revenue, potential cost, and how that's going to impact the bottom line.
Okay. Lisa, please tell us about your greatest strength and your greatest weakness.
My greatest strength is, I think, my conceptual skills. I generally see the big picture up here, and I want to understand how the pieces fit in. But I also share that information with people so they understand their role. They might think they're this little cog, but if they realize how important that spot is to this big spot. But that and my finance background, I was a treasurer and tax collector. I've spent time as an accountant, mostly paying bills and doing payroll. Paying your staff is one of the most important things you have to do. And so it's always my priority. Pay the staff, pay the veterans, pay the local vendors, and then kind of in that order if I had to manage the cash flow. So my finance background is strong. My connections to the State House are strong. The work I've done on the Mass Municipal Association, I'm on the Fiscal Policy Committee, so I have a voice and I bring things up that sometimes get forgotten out here in Berkshire County and particularly with the smaller towns. My biggest weakness is I think sometimes I sound like my mother, but it's easier to do something myself than to teach somebody how to do it. But I try, if someone needs help, I stop and help them, but sometimes that means my work gets behind. And so I hate to say no, which can then bog me down later.
Good answer.
Lisa, as you know, town manager is responsible for preparing and presenting the town's annual budget and the capital budget to the Finance Committee and Select Board. Can you just tell us a little bit about your experience with budgeting, preferably in a municipal environment?
When I was in Buckland, the town administrator was in charge of it, but we had to have our first line budget to her by like the middle of December. Which was new for me. I was like, wait, what do you mean you need this? I started in September, so I was like, wait, why do you need this? So my experience was preparing my department budget, which included health insurance, veterans benefits, the wastewater treatment plant, their costs that I had to cover. But also, as someone who had worked in municipal government, I'd been in Sandusfield, my boss worked with me. Like, I was a sounding board and I worked with her and we did things together a lot when, and then with the city council, obviously the mayor gives the city council a budget but I've been on the finance committee and chaired it. I don't know how many times. But I ask questions. I look at the budget and say, wait, why is this here? Why aren't we doing that? So my approach is, talk to the department heads. Also, I try to tie things into goals. For example, as the treasurer tax collector, I wanted to get more money in my line item for legal fees so that I could do more tax title, tax takings, maybe handle some land court issues. That's a nightmare and it's expensive, but I was tying it to the goal to increase collections. And I would try and ask, and that's the format that the GFOA has for for setting budgets is to have them related to goals as much as possible. Now, I understand the biggest expense, other than the school, is your salaries, and those are set either by contract or by your classification compensation plan. So I would start with that. But also, when it comes to, I need a new person, I want another staff member, well, why? How does it help the department? How does it help the residents? So I'd ask for justification and how we can sell it. And then, unfortunately, your health insurance, you can't fix it. Your electric bills, you can't. You get numbers, and a lot of budgeting is just plugging in numbers, but I don't believe in, we've always budgeted $20,000 for this, but we've only spent 12 the last 3 years. Maybe we should cut that budget item down to 12, 5, 13, and not 20. So I do approach it based on past, but also anticipating the future.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hey, Lisa, could you please describe your role and relationship with department heads in your previous positions, and how you would establish a leadership position and promote communication and teamwork with and across departments?
So when I worked at Buckland's, I was there 5.5 years. So I was part of a big team, and because I did payroll and had a purview over a lot of things, payroll, health insurance, I had a pretty good relationship with all of the department heads. And so my goal would be to hold the regular department head meetings as a team, not just me with the highway super or the director of public services or the police or the treasurer's office. I think you kind of have to meet with them, but you also have to be part of a team. And one of the things, it sounds stupid, but one of the things I did in Buckland is we had a fitness challenge. And instead of making it the town hall employees against the DPW, against the police department, we decided to make sure that there was at least one member of every department and no more than 2 members on each team, and we split it up. So I had one of the guys working for the highway on my team, and the assistant town clerk, and somebody else from a department. But the immediate go-to was to break it up by department, and I said, no, we need to make it a town thing. And so we did it that way, and we split it up so we were all encouraged. And I also think sometimes it's important to explain how people and departments are interconnected. Obviously, the treasurer, collector, assessor, and accountant are all greatly interrelated. And the accountant's kind of related to everything. And the treasurer pays everybody, so everybody usually knows who that person is. But knowing the challenges that each department faces, I think if everybody kind of understands we're all in the same boat, we're here to move forward. And I think you've had your accountant was here forever. You've had some really long-term employees. I think that really helps build that team, because these people have been here. They know the town, they know their job. Okay, can things be improved? They can always be improved. But I haven't seen a lot of turnover here compared to some other communities. And I think that's important, and I would use that to my advantage. And I communicate. Everything's about communicating. And don't pit departments against each other. So that happens in small towns. People run for select board on a 3 board because they like the highway department and they don't like the police department. And then that creates a conflict in and of itself. So I'm not that way, and I don't see that here, because having 5 helps. But you guys have had professional management for a long time too, and I think that helps.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, John, you're up on number 8.
The town manager serves as Dalton's chief procurement officer. Please tell us about your experience in this area.
I have my CPPO, or I'm a certified PPO. I think it expires next month, but I have a lot of continuing ed credits. I have to figure out what's where and what I need to take.
Can you tell us what that means?
Oh, I'm sorry, the certified public procurement officer. That's a certification, I think it was in the job description, you had to have it within a year. So I have to take more classes to renew it or keep it active. I did in in Savoy, Florida, and Rowe, we got grants for air quality. They were called HVAC grants. So in Savoy, we had to close school because Grid wanted to do work on poles and was going to shut off power. And we had no power, so we couldn't run the water, and, it's a small town, they've got wells, so I checked with the person at the state, does a new generator meet that requirement? And it did, because of the nature of our community, that community being small, and the power goes out in Savoy and in Rowe a lot. And we got the grant. I had to procure the two things. We did a boiler and the associated refitting of pipes and whatever it is makes the boiler work. Not my area of expertise. I know how to ask for it and pay for it. And I know how to turn on the on switch. And so we did that, and then we procured a generator and all the different things that went with it. But when they got there, they also found that there were lines that didn't meet the state requirements of how deep they were supposed to be buried.
Right.
So we had to do some adjustments. So that involved making adjustments, not with the procurement, but finally with the state. The other thing I had to procure was the bus contracts every, I think, 3 to 5 years. So I did that for Clarksburg, Florida, Savoy, and Rowe. I did all 4 of them. One of them was done kind of through the FERCog because they're part of Franklin County. So I procured that. I'm not sure to think what else I did. Down in Sandusfield, we did a full depth reclamation of a half a mile of road, $500,000 for half a mile road. Did that at the time. I worked with the time Kathy Stevens was the District 1 MassDOT person, and she helped price it out. I worked with the Berkshire Regional Planning because it was my first procurement job. They wrote the proposal. I worked on it. I also worked on it with one of our select board members who had been an engineer with MassDOT, and we procured that. We procured a roof. That was before. Now they've upped it to $50,000, and now there's discussion to hopefully, because schools don't have to put things out to bid, they have to get 3 estimates, written estimates under $100,000. The push is to give municipalities the same thing, and I know that was part of the legislation. So I kind of worked both sides of it.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Okay, Lisa. Town manager is the principal collective bargaining agent with the assistance of a designated select board member and a town council. Tell us about your experience in labor negotiations with grievance procedures and in negotiating, collecting bargaining agreements.
When I was in Sandusfield, I negotiated the contract with they had a contract, the highway department. So we had that. They wanted comp time because their vacation policy was not particularly good, and particularly for the first year, it wasn't good. They wanted comp time. They wanted some other things that we negotiated. I think what they did is the comp time was an issue because technically the way they wanted to use it is a violation of federal labor laws. So we kind of tweaked the vacation policy a little and did some other things. In Buckland, we didn't have any contracts. Everybody was at will. Nobody was. The town administrator had her own contract, but that was it. As far as grievance procedures, I haven't done we had union grievance procedures in a couple of things that came up in in Sandusfield, with somebody had an accident in the truck and had a medical condition. There was all these things that had to be finagled and worked through. As far as grievance, I worked at Walmart as a personnel manager for 5 years, and they didn't have contract, but they had, discipline policies. Same thing when I was a HR manager at Wheatley, 5-star, 5-diamond hotel on the Lenox Stockbridge line. Again, I handled all the complaints and managed that process. I worked in a bank, I was the manager, so I handled any of that, and we didn't have union contracts, but we had progressive discipline everywhere I've worked, and I've been part of that. Always, when you hire somebody, you handle the paperwork and the information you give them with the idea that you may have to fire them someday. As depressing as that sounds.
Thank you.
Lisa, as you know, the town manager supervises department heads and provides guidance to other municipal boards, committees, and commissions. And with respect to your direct reports, please tell us about your experience evaluating staff and whether you believe conducting performance reviews increases job satisfaction and productivity.
I think performance evaluations they should increase productivity, but they shouldn't be a surprise. You should have regular conversations with your, I hate the word subordinate, but the people you're supervising, so that they don't have a surprise. In Buckland, we had we also had a self-evaluation as part of the process. The same thing when I was at the bank, I had 5 people reporting to me. I had an assistant manager and 3 or 4 teller, banker, whatever the word of the day was. And again, so that, to my opinion, is that there should be always feedback. My attitude has always been praise in public, punish in private. Punish is a bad word, but discipline in private. But again, it shouldn't be a surprise. They should know what you think of the job they're doing. And you also have to be wary of the halo/devil effect. You don't get judged on the last thing you did, whether it was good or bad. It has to be over a period of time. It's nice to have quantitative things, if possible. Tax collections were 97% last year. They're 98% this year. Good job. Things like that. If you can have some quantitative measurements, in some cases, that's helpful. Direct reports, obviously fewer than what you have in the town of Dalton. I'm sorry, it's a little late. So span, but then my attitude is that you should have one boss. You should report to one boss and only one boss. No, at least one boss and no more than one boss. As far as that's standard management, so I would have direct reports of department heads, and then the department heads would be responsible for their people. Now, obviously, if a department head isn't managing their staff properly, then that becomes an issue because that's their job, so then it would involve me.
Thank you.
Okay, Lisa,
I anticipated this time.
are you aware of the ongoing concerns voiced by our residents regarding mining operations by Berkshire Concrete Corporation in Dalton? And from your perspective, what are some of the possible solutions to address this issue?
Yes, I'm aware. I've read the articles. I would have to get more deep. I have to research and look at things. I don't have environmental factors kind of on the top of my head, unless it's, the GE dumping, that's a little more familiar. So what I would do is I would do more research. I would look at what's been discussed, and I would talk to kind of both sides to see where we can compromise. And also, obviously, as we get to that idea of some compromise, what can people live with, and also involve the legal team. And when I was in Buckland, and when I was in Sandusfield, we had the pipeline come through, and they were doing a lot of, would be doing a lot of work in there. So we set some contracts, some guidelines. They were concerned about environmental, like invasive species coming in on the trucks and be dumped out there, or coming off the trucks on their way out. Negotiating with the residents who were impacted by the pipeline, specifically their land. We created a host community agreement on what the town would get. I negotiated about $800,000 in things like a couple of highway trucks and plows and things that we needed. Before that was finalized, I left, so I'm not even sure what happened with it, but that was my experience in trying to find compromise and trying to deal with big corporation versus residents and trying to find that balance.
Okay, thank you.
John?
Yeah. Lisa, I think we're at the end of the questions the board has for yourself, and they've all been great answers and very thoughtful and professional, and we thank you for coming. But before we close, you got any questions for the board?
How do you plan on paying for the police station?
Wow.
Primarily borrowing.
What are you, a comedian on the side?
You said it earlier.
Borrowing, you're gonna bond, and you're gonna bond. So you haven't been rated since 2019. So you're gonna have to start that process.
Bond rating.
Bond rating. Now, I don't know, and obviously Terry probably knows the answer to this. I had to apply for Buckland's bond rating. We never had any bond rating at all. And so I did the work to get our bond rating, which came in at a AA. It would have come in as a AA plus, but it was during COVID and all municipalities were being downgraded. But I got a 1.49% rate on $3.1 million for 20 years.
The timing is so good during the pandemic.
It was, but everybody, even our financial advisor was surprised that we got such a good rate. So they were really happy. So they were happy to the point where the select board said, hey, can we borrow more money and fix some roads? But so there's a process there to get, because the bond rate is generally better. And with a borrowing this big, if you go through the state, the rate's not good. You're gonna have to get a bond rating.
Gonna need a big debt exclusion.
I think we have a bond rating.
Yeah, not since 2019.
Oh,
It was AA, I looked it up.
yeah, it is AA, right?
It's AA through 2019. So I don't know the process for getting an updated one.
I think Ken was still here.
Yeah.
Was still here. I
Yeah.
know he worked on it.
I don't think our real issue is with the bond rating or floating the bond. I think it's the financial impact on the taxpayers that we're concerned with. Because it was still smarting somewhat over the regional school.
Right.
That's what we're looking at.
And I would think that it would have to have a debt exclusion, but I haven't gotten in the weeds.
Yeah.
So then you would have to get you'd get bond counsel and a financial advisor to do that. That's something I'm pretty familiar with. And I have names of people that can do that, so.
Any other questions, please?
Trying to think what I asked at the other meeting.
Hey, take your time.
What is the plan for training the accountant?
We're going to be able to, fortunately, keep the services kind of on a consulting basis of Sandy Albano.
Okay.
Our 25-year accountant who's retiring. She can't work for a certain period of time after her last payroll check.
Yep.
And then she's taking a trip to Italy for a couple of weeks. But she'll be back, she'll meet, I think, with the new accountant, at least one whole day. But then she'll be back after her trip and plans to be involved intimately with the tax rate, the Sept.
Oh, right.
The wrap-up of the balance sheet, going through the Schedule A, hopefully with the new accountant.
Okay.
The new accountant appears to be a very good accountant, but has zero Massachusetts municipal experience, which of course, big part here, to all this.
And it's a whole different animal.
You have to, concur with here.
Well, and the other thing, I guess I thought, if Sandy's gonna be away and she's gonna she's gonna be there for a couple weeks, another option might be to reach out to Pittsfield or some of the other communities, Lennox. Would your accountant be willing to come and work with us for a few days, or?
That's it.
That would be a good way to onboard her, at least, so she can, not just reading manuals, she can kind of get a handle on things.
Yeah.
And I know that the Berkshire, all the managers around and most of the select boards have a good relationship with the surrounding communities, so I think they understand, we've all been there. They're willing to help out usually.
When Sandy started, she had no municipal experience, and now probably one of the best accountants around.
That's good.
No shortcuts with her.
You can't make shortcuts in accounting. Can't make them in the treasurer's office either.
Well, she won't let you get away with it.
And then what's the process going forward? I know you are all meeting tomorrow
Yeah,
evening.
we're gonna meet tomorrow,
That's right.
debate, and hopefully offer one of you the position. So,
7 o'clock, here.
Open meeting.
I said open the meeting.
Yeah, I won't be here.
You
The
can watch
other,
it on Zoom.
my husband wanted to know. I said, don't watch. I don't want to know. Because then as soon as I get home, he'll be more critical than any of you would have been. And then negotiations start. And is one person handling that, or are you doing that in executive
we
session?
have 2 members of the select board negotiating.
Okay.
I imagine we would motion for that
Yeah.
tomorrow as well.
Okay.
Well, I mean,
We got one.
Might not be on the agenda.
Town manager would be in touch for sure.
Okay. I just
And
was.
the select board chair.
And they're extending me another 30 days, effective after the 3rd, which is the current end date.
Right.
So the plan is whomever is chosen, first, they usually have to give some notice or whatever. And then when they actually arrive, I'll plan to work with that individual for as long as they want, a week or 2 weeks, probably more.
And because your trip is planned, you've already changed it.
Yeah, not a problem. Yeah,
Okay.
so, I told them that up front. Then it went by the original date, and it's still needed.
Okay.
So I'm definitely here till November 3rd, and the contract stipulates that when I'm done, whatever that point is, if it's before the end date of the contract, it's time to go.
But you live in town and you're not that far away.
Yeah,
I can probably find you and knock on your door if I were hired.
It's about a 2-minute ride to work every morning.
That's nice. I had that for a while. It took me longer to walk to my car than to drive up the hill. I guess that's it for my questions.
we thank you, Lisa. And,
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.
Yes, Tony.
Yes, I just have one question of Lisa, please.
Okay.
Lisa, if I'm not mistaken, you hold a number of positions in North Adams now, including city council, planning board, and school building committee. If you're selected, do you plan to hold those positions?
I plan to keep my city council position. And the school building, right, has not been a huge commitment. The planning board might be the one I might have to give up, but I would kind of see what the schedule is. And it's not really a conflict. North Adams, one, we have very little control over anything other than the city clerk's office. We approve the budget, we have meetings, but we're not competing with Dalton on anything.
But you have to watch out for meeting dates.
You're right, and that would, obviously, this would take precedence. I've done this, I mean, I did this when I was in Sandusfield, and that was a much longer drive. And in Buckland, it was, and it was the same thing in Buckland, but there was very little conflict, and if they needed me, they met on the same night as the city council, but they met at 5 o'clock. We met at 7:30 at the time, so that was, if they needed, and during COVID, they needed more, so, but those were always Zoom meetings anyway, so it was easy for me to Zoom in, but, yeah, I would be very cognizant of what, like, annual town meeting, I understand, and I understand all the meetings that go into prepping for that, and I'm cognizant of that, and I would not take on, if I were to get reelected, because I'm up for reelection, we get committee assignments, and I would make sure that I generally probably would not be on the finance committee, and I definitely wouldn't chair it. Anything else?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Where we go?
Get some sleep.
All right, now, before we go, we got a decision to make tomorrow.
7 o'clock.
5:30, you
Get some
gotta
rest.
go for it.
Review your notes, come back and we'll read through and hopefully choose one. Thank you for the Dalton residents that showed up tonight, appreciate it. Thank you to all the candidates. Okay. A motion to adjourn.
Oh, we're in formal vote. Yeah, I move we adjourn.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Wait, I'm just waiting for it.
Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, Tony.